Well, this is a video I didn't really anticipate making as I started working on this plate. It's a pretty big plate, but as you can see from the uncarved stuff, it's a pretty repetitive pattern, some pretty typical chip shapes and stuff that I've done. Nothing too interesting going on as far as sharing the process compared to other videos that I've got. But one interesting thing did happen as I was carving these larger kind of triangular chips around the middle, and that is that I accidentally carved through. I didn't realize that this plate is not the same as other plates that I've bought. Usually the middle part has some extra thickness, some extra depth to it compared to the rim, and in this case the plate doesn't really have any extra thickness here. So as I was carving these larger chips that I wasn't really concerned about as I got started, the first one ended up going through, and there's not once I carve through and lose the wood, there's not a whole lot that I can do about that. So my plan at this point is just to continue carving all of them as otherwise planned, and they'll just all have that kind of triangular hole missing in the bottom, and maybe it'll create kind of a neat look when it's done. But since that's an unusual thing to happen, and I think usually not intended, I figured I'd kind of show what that looks like. And since these are large chips, I do the relief chips out of the middle instead of doing it all at once. Demonstrated this plenty of times, so nothing too crazy there. You might see that it actually does flex. The center of the plate isn't all the way flat against the bottom, so that's something I've also noticed with this one. But I'll end up doing two. I might normally do one, but because of how thin it is, I want to make sure that I don't break the wood in a way different from slicing it with the blade. So I'm making sure to get pretty close here, staying off the line, but going pretty close up so that that final chip doesn't put too much strain on the wood. So now I haven't gone through quite yet. Might go a little bit if I finish this piece here. Yeah, there's a little bit of a dark spot. So this chip now, this final pass, will create that hole. Oops. Stay on the line. And I'm making sure to keep the chips, the angle of the knife, pretty shallow here. I don't want to remove too much, make too big of a hole in the bottom, and also just, as with any large chip, the steeper you make it, the more wood you're removing, the harder it can be on yourself. So going pretty light on these. But you can see as far as the kind of process, it's just a normal chip to remove, but being aware of what's happening in the bottom is helpful to know, not to be pushing too hard, not to put too much stress and strain in the wood, because it is all very weak down here. As it gets super thin, not a whole lot to support it. And I'll have to see once I'm done exactly what they all look like. You can see they're all pretty similar, but this one's a little bit smaller, and this one right now is kind of smaller still. So I'll have to compare how they all look as far as size and shape, see if I need to do any touching up to make them look more consistent. But yeah, that's kind of the process there. Just a normal chip, and when I get here, the knife is actually going through the wood and sticking out the back. Something to be aware of, if depending on what you're carving on. I always carve on this washcloth. In this case, I have it taped on because it kept sliding around. But if you're carving with a thin wood or large chips relative to the thickness of wood, definitely good to be aware of if you might be going through and making sure that you've got something underneath to protect if you don't want to damage the desk or table or whatever you're carving on.